Manager.
And with that, we say hello. David Lloyd and Shea Cornette here with you with a fresh hour of SportsCenter. Big news in the NFL right before we came on air. The Cowboys have themselves a new head coach, and it turns out, David, they didn't have to look very far to find
No moving expenses for this hire or nothing. It's a move that's sure to kind of frustrate a Cowboys fan base that's impatient for a Super Bowl champ. Dallas has promoted its offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer, to head coach. He will replace Mike McCarthy. Schottenheimer, the Cowboys OC 2 years ago. This season, the Cowboys' offense was 16th in yards per game, albeit without Dak Prescott for much of the season. This will be Schottenheimer's first NFL head coaching job. In his first year in Dallas, the Cowboys put up gaudy numbers on offense for Schottenheimer, ranked top 6 in touchdowns and yards per game. This season, though, it was a different story. The Cowboys' offense scored the third fewest touchdowns this season, while also averaging nearly 50 fewer yards a game. Senior NFL insider Adam Schefter joins us now. Adam, Brian Schottenheimer is a name that didn't generate a lot of buzz in league circles. In fact, he didn't even get an interview for any other head coaching vacancies. So take us through this decision and why Schottenheimer was picked over others the Cowboys looked at.
Look, this is somebody that I think, most important, Jerry Jones felt very comfortable with. When he called Friday night to deliver the news that he had just hired Brian Schottenheimer, and that Brian Schottenheimer, a career assistant, is no longer a career assistant. He's now the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones sounded awfully excited about this. Brian Schottenheimer is somebody that he knows, is comfortable with, believes in, knows the system, that his quarterback, the highest paid player in football, Dak Prescott, is comfortable with. And so there are any number of elements that appealed to Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys as they move forward in these talks. They met with Brian Schottenheimer on Wednesday, again on Thursday, throughout the day on Friday, and clearly everything that they heard during those discussions made them come to the realization and the decision that there was no need to prolong this search any longer, and it was time to give Brian Schottenheimer his very first NFL head coaching job.
Okay. Now, Dallas didn't decide on Mike McCarthy until a full week after the season, and maybe because of it, they didn't even get some of the more highly sought-after candidates into their building. Adam, was there some mismanagement here on the part of Dallas? What do you make of the situation and the guy they ultimately got and the guys that they didn't get?
It was unusual the way it played out, David, but it really didn't cost the Dallas Cowboys any candidates. It doesn't feel or seem as if they were in the market for Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn, so therefore that's irrelevant. The other coaches they didn't interview were not on their interview list, and they were focused in on the group of coaches that they spoke to. And from the moment they began meeting with Brian Schottenheimer on Wednesday, it became readily apparent that this was somebody that they were targeting to be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. There are other names. They met with Robert Saleh, the man who's now taken the defensive coordinator job for the San Francisco 49ers. They met with the former Vikings head coach Leslie Frazier. Jerry Jones himself spoke with Deion Sanders, but never actually interviewed him for the job. Not that he would have needed to interview Deion for the job. The idea of Jason Witten was kicked around. But all along, it seemed like they were focused in on Brian Schottenheimer. Kellen Moore, also an assistant coach with the Eagles, offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, was a name that they spoke to. But again, it really felt like this was going to be Brian Schottenheimer's job. And Friday night, Jerry Jones made that official.
And so now the Saints are the last NFL team which hasn't filled its head coaching vacancy. Adam Schefter with us with some late Friday night news that the Cowboys have hired Brian Schottenheimer as their new head coach.
SportsCenter, the Dallas Cowboys are hiring their offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer, to be their head coach. This will be Schottenheimer's first head coaching job after being an assistant in the league for 14 years. Jerry Jones pointed this out in a statement saying, quote, "He's no assistant anymore," end quote. So with Schotty now taking the reins, the Cowboys will look to get back to their 2023 form with a fully healthy Dak Prescott, who had one of the best years of his career that season. They still have to solve the cap issue, of course. They need to clear $3.6 million, but they also got to plug a few holes from free agency. However, the head coaching job is now secured. So let's welcome in our Cowboys reporter, Todd Archer. And Todd, the Cowboys interviewed 4 candidates officially for the head coaching vacancy. As someone like you who is around this team day in and day out, what was it about Brian Schottenheimer that made the Cowboys decide to stay in-house and promote their OC?
Yeah, you heard Adam Schefter at the start of the show talk about familiarity and comfortability with Jerry Jones and Brian Schottenheimer. There's also a familiarity and comfortability between Brian Schottenheimer and Dak Prescott. They've developed a close relationship over these last 2 years, and really 3 when Brian was here as a consultant in 2022, working mostly with the defense. But while he wasn't calling plays these last 2 years, every time when Dak came off the field, he was talking to Brian Schottenheimer, going over what they had just seen, going over how different ways they want to attack defenses. They've learned to see the game way, and Brian Schottenheimer is known as a run-first offensive coordinator when you look at his history, but I can point to Seattle, his 3-year run there with the Seahawks. Russell Wilson threw 106 touchdown passes, just 25 interceptions. So if they can get Dak Prescott back to playing at that level like he did in 2023 under Mike McCarthy, like he did in 2021 under Kellen Moore, then the Cowboys might be back in that playoff chase like they were the last 3 seasons before 2024.
Okay, one can only hope, because there are 2 teams right now still playing football that are in the NFC East as well. Having a strong supporting cast will be the next step now for Schotty, and I don't mean on the field, I mean in terms of his coaching staff. What are you hearing as far as offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator?
Let's start with the defensive coordinator, and indications are that Matt Eberflus, the former Chicago Bears head coach, will be high on the Cowboys' priority list, and talking to him about possibly returning to Dallas. He was an assistant under Jason Garrett for a number of years, working first with Rob Ryan and then Rod Marinelli on defense before moving on as an assistant and ultimately becoming Chicago's head coach. Maybe some coaches from his staff that he had with the Bears as well. And then the offensive side, that's where it gets a little bit interesting, because it's my understanding that Brian Schottenheimer will be the one calling the plays. So finding the right offensive coordinator for him, maybe someone with an offensive line tie to help that running game get back up to speed the way it was early under Jason Garrett's tenure, and finding some explosive plays in the passing game is a must. And there's also another part they have to replace, and that's the special teams. They lost their coordinator, John Fossil, earlier this week to Tennessee. So as much as Brian Schottenheimer is just getting used to this job, he's got a lot of spots to fill on his staff.
Yeah, time to get to work. A lot of hose to fill. So if Brian Schottenheimer does call the plays, as Todd Archer's
In a move sure to frustrate a Cowboys fan base impatient for a Super Bowl champion, Dallas has promoted its offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer, to head coach to replace Mike McCarthy. Schottenheimer became the Cowboys OC 2 years ago. This season, the offense was 16th in yards per game, albeit without Dak Prescott for much of the year. This will be Schottenheimer's first NFL head coaching job. So in the last 24 hours, the Cowboys, Raiders, and Jags have all found their new head coaches. Previously, Lions coordinators Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn were each hired for their first head coaching jobs with the Bears and Jets, while Mike Vrabel is reunited with the Patriots. Only one vacancy still remains: the New Orleans Saints.
Speaking of, David, is it just me, or does this Pete Carroll hire in Las Vegas have Tom Brady written all over it? The 2 are familiar, to say the least, having faced off 4 times, including in Super Bowl 49, which Brady famously won after Carroll elected to throw the ball instead of run it on 2nd and goal, resulting in the Malcolm Butler interception. I'm sure you remember. Of the 4 meetings, they split wins. And then there's the Patriots connection, right? Remember, Pete was the coach in New England before they hired Bill. He and Brady never overlapped, but I'm sure that they have reminisced. And so now, in Sin City, they picked a true adult, the oldest NFL head coach who has more energy, truthfully, than half of these young coordinators. He'll work to establish an identity and culture to win games quickly. And who better to do it than a guy who has 11 playoff wins, including a Super Bowl and 2 national titles at the college level. Here's Adam Schefter with more on Pete Carroll joining the Raiders.
At a time where many teams are opting for the youngest, best, and brightest coordinators in coaching, the Las Vegas Raiders went with the old, reliable method in hiring Pete Carroll, a man who helped transform USC and Seattle, a man who's coached in championships. The Raiders recognized that they have a ways to go to catch up to the Kansas City Chiefs, Los Angeles Chargers, and Denver Broncos, and they felt like Pete Carroll can be that bridge, implement that culture, and get this organization back where it needs to be until they can find a quarterback and get on more even traction with the rest of the AFC West.